Well, I forgot to title this one, but this is our trip through the wake world, part three. So I'll put a big three like that. Well, because I'm no longer tethered by my cable for Wi-Fi and putting in my computer and such, I figured I could move around today and speak to you from the only organized, half organized, well, eighth organized corner of the living room area this morning. So that's why I'm in this comfy chair uh, for today's reading. And of course, we're on the wake world. And yesterday we got ourselves all the way up to Hode. Okay, so this is a climb up the tree, up from here, from 10, up this path to 9, and then simultaneously under this path and this path to get ourselves to Hode, number 8. That's the sphere of Mercury. So that's where we are. Now this whole section of the Tree of Life is sort of that first entry period of the Golden Dawn initiation. Once we get over here to Netzach, which we'll talk about today, and we'll have to go on these scary paths to get ourselves to Netzach, we're at the threshold of the rest of the Tree of Life. So it's kind of a pretty important preliminary section here. And remember, little Lola Daydream's story here is a Alice in Wonderland fairy tale of the Golden Dawn initiatory program, or at least the structure of it. Now each of those paths, 22 paths that join all of these together, are attributed to Hebrew letters, and those Hebrew letters are attributed to tarot keys, or the tarot trumps. So that's just to review. So we're already in Hode, the sphere of Mercury, number 8. Now we got to get ourselves to number 7, which is the sphere of Venus. Okay. The last sentence here in from yesterday was trailing us off on the characteristics of the scenery, I guess, in number 8, Hode. And there were cheats and doctors and thieves. I was very glad to go away. Now, there are 3 ways to the 7th house, she says, okay? And the 7th house, of course, is Netzach. Now, see, there's 3 ways to get to it. You may not think there's 3 ways, but there is. Because there's the way that goes from 10 to 7. There's the way that goes from 9 to 7. And there's a way that goes directly from 8 to 7. You know, the Tree of Life is like one of those novelty straws, okay? If you can imagine the paths as a novelty straw. And then at the very top of the Tree of Life, that's where the big sucker, the guy that's sucking on the straw, is like God, okay? And he's sucking from Malkuth all the way up the Tree of Life, but all of these paths are little tributaries of the big suck, which is a technical Kabbalistic term. The evolution, awakening is sucks. Okay. And so as you go up, first of all, you know, the main thing goes from here to here, but to get to here to here, the flavor straw sucking has to come up all the paths at once. It's like you're sucking everything up with you. And it's the same thing with initiation. When you get to the level of number 10, you don't actually leave number 10 behind. There is no behind. You take your behind with you. You suck your ass up with you at every step of the way. So you suck your 10 into 9 by this path, okay? But when you go from 9 to 8, okay, your 10 goes up this path and your 9 goes up that path. Does that make? I'm sure it doesn't make. Just think that everything sucks, and you never stop being. You never stop being a 10. You drag the ass of your 10 up to the 9 with you, and you draw your 9 to be a number 8. You draw your 9 to number 8 this way, but you draw your 10. You draw your ass up this way, okay? But I digress. We're really getting far this morning. There are 3 ways to the 7th house. And the first was such a funny way. Okay, we're going to talk about the Kuf. Okay, we're going to talk about Kuf, which is dragging the 10 up. Okay, this is the path of Kuf, right there. Spared no expense in the audio visual. We're not through the first sentence yet. There were 3 ways to the 7th house. The first was such a funny way. We walk through a pool on the arm of a great big beetle. Okay, this is the moon card, Kuf. Okay. You could call it cough if you want. So that's how you tell if a Kabbalist died, by his final cough. I beg your pardon. There are 3 ways to the 7th house. The first was such a funny way. We walked through a pool on the arm of a great beetle, and then we found ourselves on a winding path. This is the moon, classic moon card image. There were nasty jackals about it. They made such a noise, and at the end I could see 2 towers. Then there was the queerest moon you ever saw, only a quarter full. The shadows fell so strangely. One could see mysterious shapes, like great bats with women's faces and blood dripping from their mouths, and creatures, partly wolves and partly men, everything changing into one another. And we saw shadows like old, ugly women creeping about on sticks. And all of a sudden, they would fly up into the air, shrieking the funniest kind of songs, and then suddenly one would come down flop. And you saw that she was really quite young and ever so lovely. And she would have nothing on. And you looked at her, and as you looked at her, she would crumble away like a biscuit. Then there was another passage, which was really too secret for anything. Okay, and that passage was Tsadi. Okay, the fish hook. And Tsadi on this thing here goes from 9 to 7. The straw gets sucked, your 9 gets sucked into 7 by this path. And it's Tsadi. Now, let's not get waylaid. Crowley wrote this before his revelation about Tsadi not being the star and things like that. So this is still the path of Tsadi, according to one way of looking at things. So let's not open up that can of worms right now, because there is no end to that debate. Maybe we'll talk about that some other time. Okay. Then there was another passage, which really was too secret for anything. And I shall tell you all I shall tell you is this. There was the most beautiful goddess that ever was. And she was washing herself in a river of dew. If you ask what she is doing, she says, I'm making thunderbolts. It was only starlight, and yet one could see quite clearly. So don't think I'm making a mistake. The third path is a most terrible passage. And that's the one that drags 8 to 7. And it's the Tower card. The Hebrew letter is Pei, which means mouth. The third path is a most terrible passage. It's all a great war, and this is the Tower card. It's all a great war. And there's earthquakes and chariots of fire and all the castles breaking to pieces. And I was glad when we came to the Green Palace. The Green Palace is number 7 itself, Netzach. Okay. Remember, the Paz are the Hebrew letters, and the Sephiroth, or the Sephiroth themselves, are the numbers 1 through 10. And all that's based on the opening words of the classic Sefer Yetzirah, that deity created the universe in 32 mysterious paths, 10 numbers, and 22 letters. So the paths are the Sephiroth of the 10 numbers, and the 22 letters are the paths that join them. Together, they make one gigantic straw, novelty, crazy-ass straw, novelty straw that only God can suck. And then you realize you're the God that's sucking yourself. Oh, what have I said? Okay. I'm not sure Facebook's going to let me keep this one, dear.
All I know is everything sucks.
Constance says, especially now, everything sucks. I was glad when we came to the Green Palace. It was all built of malachite and emerald, and there was the loveliest, gentlest living, okay, or existing there, that kind of living, okay. And the technical title of Netzach is Victory. It was all built of malachite and emerald, and there was the loveliest, gentlest living. And I was married to my fairy prince. There. And we had the most delicious honeymoon, and I had a beautiful baby. And then I remembered myself, but only just in time. And he said, "Kiss me." And he kissed me and said, "My goodness, but that was a near thing that time. My little girl nearly went to sleep." Most people who reach the seventh house stay there all their lives, I can tell you. I'm going to digress here. Here I go. If you're familiar with the classic, popular Wagnerian opera, Tannhäuser, okay? Tannhäuser was, I guess, he was a Meistersinger, a master singer. But that meant he was a knight. But there was a period where the knights sort of ran out of people to kill, and they didn't have much of a job as being knights, so they became competitive songwriters. It's similar to what the Japanese samurai did when between feudal periods when they had to fight. They developed highly developed other skills that they sword making, poetry, tea, flower arranging. Okay, it was done with the same devotional intensity of a martial art kind of thing. Well, that's the same thing with these Meistersingers. They instead of tournaments where they joust, they had songwriting tournaments and singing tournaments. But anyway, Tannhäuser was one of these guys. But at the beginning of the opera, he has got himself stranded in Venusberg, okay, Netzach, Venusberg, okay, and it's where the goddess Venus herself is his lover, and keeps him completely focused and trapped on that by that love, okay. And she doesn't want him to go back into the world and go back into his, she doesn't want him to get his own holy guardian angel. He just wants him to stay there and just screw his brains out, okay? And that's what the fairy prince meant when he said, the seventh house, most people who reach the seventh house stay there all their lives. In other words, attached, totally, identify totally with the impressions that they receive from the five senses. Okay. Most people who reach the seventh house, that level of consciousness of the seventh house, stay there all their lives, I can tell you. It did seem a shame to go on. There was such a flashing green star to light it, and all the air was filled with amber-colored flames like kisses. And we could see through the floor, and there were terrible lions like furnaces for fury, and they all roared out, "Holy, holy, holy," and leaped and danced for joy. And when I saw myself in the mirrors, the dome was one mass of beautiful green mirrors, I saw how serious I looked, and that I had to go on. And I hope the fairy prince would look serious too, because it is the most dreadful business going on beyond the seventh house. But he only looked the same as ever. But oh, how I kissed him and how I clung to him. Or I think I should never, never have had the courage to go up those dreadful passages, especially knowing what was at the end of them. And now I'm only a little girl, and I'm ever so tired of writing. But I'll tell you all about the rest. Okay, and the rest leads on to part 2. And so this ends the first chapter, explicit or the external college. Okay, and in the Golden Dawn, that's the end of that preliminary section. To go from 7 to 6 is like a preview of crossing the abyss. And it's a portal that separates this part of the tree from the rest of the tree. And that's where we'll end today. I apologize for the chaos and the digressions, but I really appreciate you being here in the mornings, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to sit down and think about something else for a few minutes in the morning. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.